Hello and welcome to this week's Hocus Focus. I'm Sara Mondaini,
And I'm Thomas Sheridan.
and we have yet another jam-packed 40 and feast for you tonight. So thank you for joining us on this cold December evening. And next week is our special Christmas night show, which will air Monday night and not Sunday. And we're also coming up to our 1 year anniversary. And some people said we wouldn't make it, but here we are, stronger than ever, with amazing viewer figures, and that's down to you. Now, in regards to our upcoming anniversary show in January, we need your help with something. So please stay tuned and we'll let you know what your mission is, should you choose to accept it at the end of this show. And how are things with you since the last show, Thomas?
Oh, all good, dealing with the winter. Nothing particularly amazing or not has happened. So it's just how I like it. It's just ticking along fine.
Business as usual.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, let's get stuck into tonight's first topic. And tonight's first topic is about a man who became one of the most influential figures in the early years of paranormal research. And that earned him the title of maybe the first celebrity ghost hunter. And his charismatic personality and major contributions to psychical research brought forward a new era in the scientific study of the paranormal. Harry Price was born in London in 1881, and he was the son of a grocer. And there's some controversy to the validity of this because Harry often referred to himself as the Shropshire lad and would insinuate that he was born in Shrewsbury and later moved to London. And he started to become interested in the paranormal when he was only 8 years old. And he'd gone to see a stage magician performing, and it was this that started his lifelong interest into the paranormal. And it was also this fascination with conjuring that eventually led him to study the tricks and the grifts that were sometimes used by some of the fraudulent mediums that had infiltrated the spiritualist movement of the time, spoiling it for those with a genuine gift. And he became a member of the Magic Circle and also held an honorary position as a librarian for the Magicians Club. And he eventually built up a library of literature which contained over 13,000 books and pamphlets and periodic titles, which covered a huge range of subjects from psychical research, parapsychology, spiritualism, the paranormal, the occult, magic, telepathy, mentalism, even ventriloquism. Now, he was a member of the Society for the Psychical Research, but while he was there as a member, he faced contempt from other members. And some people say that was due to his lack of an education in the scientific fields that they were studying, and also because he came from a working class background. And it seems that no organisation, whether it's scientific or magical, are without those people who harbour contempt towards others. Anyhow, despite this, he didn't let any of that contempt towards him make him feel undeterred or put off. And eventually, he approached the London Psychological Research Organisation and proposed the formation of a new organisation which would be dedicated to the objective investigation of mediums and other paranormal phenomena. They agreed to this, and so in 1925, the National Laboratory of Psychical Research was born, and Harry Price became one of the most influential figures in the early 19th century. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle did not like Harry Price, and this rift occurred after Price had exposed a fellow spiritualist friend of Doyle's, a spirit photographer called William Hope, as being a fraud. Now, Price had turned up to observe him with his own photographic plates to be used, which had been secretly marked and would only become apparent during development. And at the sitting, Price's knowledge of stage magic came into play when he noticed a sleight of hand trick by William Hope in the darkroom prior to the photographs being taken. And as expected, when the plates were developed, it was obvious that the spirit photographer had switched slides, and Harry published this in the Journal of the London Society for Psychical Research, and that caused a sensation within the spiritualist groups and circles. And Arthur Conan Doyle led a mass resignation of 84 members of the society because they believed that the society was opposed to spiritualism. And Doyle even became quite menacing towards Price when he threatened to have him thrown out of his laboratory, and how if he persisted to keep writing sewage about spiritualists, he'd meet the same fate as Harry Houdini, who of course was another stage magician who was exposing fraudulent mediums over in America at the time that Doyle and his henchmen of other spiritualists continued to attack Price. Doyle tried to get Price's newsletter out of circulation, and there was also some correspondence, some toing and froing between the pair of them, which was published in a newspaper. And I guess you could say that is the early 19th century equivalent of arguing on a social media post back then. And this went on for a long time, and Price actually wrote that Arthur Conan Doyle and his friends abused him for years after exposing William Hope. Now, Price was a very charismatic man with a big personality, and although he had no scientific background, he did have a natural skill and talent for the scientific field he was in, and his success was a big slap across the face, not only for the established psychical researchers who didn't like his charisma and were jealous of his natural talent because they were in a job that they'd had to go through years of intense training for, but also the spiritualist movement who didn't appreciate frauds being exposed in the circles. And in regards to Arthur Conan Doyle, I'd like to think that this was due to the embarrassment and bad press the exposure of lies caused something that he held so dear and had a devout belief in. And I don't think Doyle could bear to think, let alone believe, that there may even be frauds within something that had brought him so much comfort over the years. But then again, someone being exposed for creating fraudulent paranormal activity doesn't invalidate another's true experience of the paranormal. And I think it was a shame, really, that Arthur Conan Doyle didn't see that. And I think both he and Harry Price could have worked quite well together instead of being rivals. And Price even endorsed some mediums that he believed were genuine. And he never said that he didn't believe in the paranormal or life after death. He just didn't like the frauds that this field tended to attract. And one of Harry Price's most famous investigations was Borley Rectory, often dubbed the most haunted house in England. And his approach to the paranormal involved a blend of scientific methods and an understanding of psychological factors. And the Borley Rectory case, however, was not without its controversy either. And of course, skeptics challenged Price's findings. And beyond Borley Rectory, Price also was involved in many, many other investigations which surrounded paranormal phenomena. And Thomas and I have covered Borley Rectory in a previous episode of Hocus Focus, so I'm just giving you an overview here. But I do want to tell you about another investigation he was present at, which regards the spirit child of a young girl called Rosalie in 1937. Where at a séance at a house in London, Price claimed to have met and examined the spirit of a 6-year-old girl called Rosalie. And after the event, it was reported that he was quite shaken to the core by the experience. And after Price's death in 1948, an article recalling this most amazing experience was printed in the newspaper, in which Harry stated, and I'm just going to read a quick paragraph from Harry's own words here. In the newspaper, Harry states that many times he's been asked for his best ghost story, for the most thrilling and sensational incident in a lifetime's inquiry into the unknown and the unseen. I have investigated hundreds of alleged haunted houses, sometimes places such as Borley Rectory, with exciting results. I have attended thousands of séances, many of them in my own laboratory, in an attempt to pierce the iron curtain that separates this world from the next. I have sat in poltergeist-infested homes in which objects have been flying about that no human hand could possibly have propelled. I have seen crude, limb-like materializations form under my eyes when experimenting with the Schneider mediums. I have shivered as I watched the mercury fall during a séance when normally the air should only have become warmer. But only once have I seen what you would call a ghost, a solid 3-dimensional spirit, form in front of my eyes from the other side of the iron curtain that I have just mentioned. And then he goes on to say that On November the 8th, 1937, he was contacted by a lady with a story of how she had met a middle-aged widow at the same church. And the widow was French, and she had a British husband who was killed at war in 1916, and she moved to Britain to bring up their child, Rosalie, in London. And the child was a very, very sickly child. And when she was 6, she caught diphtheria and she died. And the mother, who Harry only refers to as Madam Z, was so distraught that she herself almost died of grief. And then one night, when Madam Z was in bed, she thought she heard a dead child's voice calling her. And this went on for a few nights, with the deceased daughter calling out the word mother. And eventually, Rosalie started to manifest as a fluorescent outline and came over to the bed and held her mother's hand. And after that, the visits became more frequent, and each time the spirit appeared more human, and the mother and child talked a little bit. And that was the story told to Harry Price by the woman who phoned him up. And she also added that she had persuaded Madame Z to visit her home to see whether Rosalie could be induced to appear during a séance. And these séances were successful. And within 6 months, they got the child materialising regularly inside the home circle every Wednesday night. And Harry was invited to go there one of these Wednesdays to attend one of the séances. And so off he went. And before they started, he set up his research and he searched the house, checking for tricks and setups, and he found none. And he sprinkled starch powder around the fireplace, and he locked the doors and windows so nobody else could get in or out. And he put the powder down to record any hand or footmarks that might come in. And he sealed the door, and he put adhesive tape all around the windows, and he drew the heavy curtains across the windows. And he said that a mouse could not have entered that room undetected, and that they were now ready for the séance. And when they started, he said he sensed that something was in front of him, and that something brushed his left hand that felt soft and cool, and he asked for permission to touch the figure. When the permission was given, he held out his arm and came into contact with what felt like a living body of a little girl, about 3 feet and 7 inches tall. And he stroked her cheeks and he rested his hand on her chest. And he said he could feel her heart beating and he could hear her breathing. And then with both hands, he felt that her hair was long and it was soft. And by this time, most of the sitters were quite distressed. And he got permission to examine the child by means of some luminous plates, and he saw that Rosalie was a well-formed little girl with dark, intelligent eyes that gazed into his own without flinching. So Harry asked permission to speak to the figure, and he asked some questions to the little girl, such as, where do you live? And do you play with other children? And are there animals where you come from? And that kind of thing. But he got no answer. And Rosalie would just stand there staring at him until he asked, do you love your mummy? And her expression changed and her eyes lit up and she said, yes. And Madame Z at that point clasped her daughter to her chest and the séance was over. And Rosalie had disappeared. And then afterwards, in the aftermath of that, they all sat there in the dark, quite dumbfounded, for about 15 minutes. And then when the lights were switched on, Harry did a quick sweep of the room and all his seals and controls were still intact. And Harry said that he'd left the séance not nearly as sceptical as when he arrived. And he said he was almost convinced from that the survival of the human personality had been demonstrated and proven. And he asked for another sitting with the mother, this time in his own laboratory with a different group of observers, and it was all agreed to. But unfortunately, before it could be arranged, Madame Z went to visit her old home in Paris, and that was at the end of August 1939. And then she apparently became caught up by the war, and nothing was ever heard of her since. And Harry Price died of a massive heart attack in March 1948, and all his archives and correspondence are now held at the University of London, and it's called the Harry Price Library of Magical Literature, which, as I mentioned earlier, contains over 13,000 items. So from an 8-year-old boy mesmerised by a stage magician to a huge figure within early psychical research, he is an inspiration to psychical research. And he wasn't a debunker. He was an open-minded skeptic who wanted to make sure that vulnerable people were not being ripped off by charlatans. And that makes him all right in my book. He exposed a lot of frauds, and as a result of that, he was also accused of being a fraud himself. But Harry Price also experienced a lot of true supernatural phenomena. So for me, he was a true objective scientist in the field of paranormal research. And what do you think of him, Thomas?
Yeah, I like Harry Price a lot, actually, the more I found out about him. He wasn't a sort of like a debunker, like a James Randi type character who was just out to prove that everyone was either a nutcase or a fraud. And he was a diligent Fortean. He was what a Fortean should be. He looked objectively, and when he found what he thought was proof, he agreed it was probably proof. And when he found it was fraud, he said it was fraud. And what more could you want? I mean, that's how to do it. I sort of can't understand on Conan Doyle's mentality. I know he lost a son in World War One, and the spiritualists gave him a lot of comfort to him and his wife. But he also comes across as a bit of a bully, like my way or the highway kind of character. He did it with Harry Houdini, and he did it with Harry Price. And to have said that what happened to Harry Houdini will happen to you, well, that was a bit nasty. I thought that was very childish, bordering on, serious intimidation. The man died after all. Price's investigation of Borley Rectory is fabulous. It's really a fascinating reading, a fascinating man. And I really can't fault the guy at all. I mean, he is well like what Hocus Pocus is, trying to find what's really going on here. And if we find dead ends, we say they're dead ends. And if we find good stuff, we say they're good stuff. And I think that he was probably too far ahead of his time that way. Sometimes back then, because of the way religion was, had a stronger hold. Faith had a stronger hold. So therefore, people wanted to believe so deeply in life after death and their family members being spirits and so on like that. It was just like almost a religion, and particularly in English-speaking countries like the United States and America and Britain, the whole spiritualist movement was almost like a religion of itself. And even like things in the development of radio, a lot of it centered around contacting what they called spirits, to see if there was they could use radio signals to get to the other side. And people like Croaks, lots of people like that who were involved in the early days of radio, or Marconi, were actually and even Alexander Graham Bell, were open to the idea of radio contacting spirits. So, it's very, so you had a situation where there was a much greater belief in that kind of thing at that time. So if anything, Harry Price's approach was the difficult one, because people took spiritualism at face value. So Conan Doyle would have been seen as the reasonable one, and people like Harry Price and Harry Houdini as the negative, almost blasphemous ones in that sense. So it took balls back then to be a proper diligent investigator, and especially as there was a lot of money involved in that. Some of these spiritualists in England and America were making lots of money doing this stuff. But the Madame Z story, the little girl could have been a fake. She could have been dropped in from wires. I don't know. She could have been real, but it definitely left him rattled. You could tell that he was affected by it. The fact that she disappeared after the war is interesting. You see, they were working within the limited, narrow bandwidth that has existed in the paranormal until, according to our second story, until recently, that afterlife, any kind of manifestation that was a spirit was assumed to be a ghost of a person who deceased, and they never really thought about demons or jinns or fairies playing tricks. And at the same time, later on, all UFOs became alien spacemen. So he never lived in a world. I haven't found any writings of his where he expanded beyond that to say where he speculated might be something else, unless you know of something, do you?
No, I've had a look, and there's nothing about him speculating beyond the spiritualist movement and mediums and that kind of thing. There was no mention of demons or jinn or fairies or folklore, nothing in those realms that I could see.
He also went to the Isle of Man to see Geff the Talking Mongoose, I believe. That's
He
to visit.
did.
Yeah, and he came away neutral about it. He didn't have it one way or the other, which I found kind of interesting because that seems like such a debunkable story in so many levels. But he obviously didn't have a. I think he was the one who took the plaster casts and brought them back to the British Museum, and they couldn't recognize what animal it came from. So I find that very interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think he was a groundbreaker in the fact that in the way that he went about research. He wasn't a James Randi, and he wasn't a true believer. He was a proper 40 and right in the middle.
I think at that time, the spiritualist movement that was just starting up, and in the Victorian times, in the front parlors doing the seances and things, I think that was the new age of that time. What we have now for the new age religion now, I think that was the new age of that time. And those kinds of things, those claims, they need investigating and looking at, because not because you want to be skeptical or debunk it or laugh at it or make a mockery of it, but they need investigating, because there's a lot of charlatans around even today that like making money out of the bereaved. So
Yep.
it's not done out of malice, it's done to protect the vulnerable, because when you're bereaved and you're grieving, you're not thinking straight, and you just want some kind of proof or confirmation that life still goes on after death. So yeah, I do believe that paranormal paranormal claims and psychic gifts should be looked at objectively if it's something that you're charging money for to provide a service, because it's very unregulated. Now, I'm open-minded. From my own experiences, I know that certain paranormal activity and phenomena is real, but that's not something that I could prove to you. It's something you have to experience for yourself. And if Harry Price had come to my house for me to try and prove it, it's quite a difficult thing to prove unless you sit around in a circle and have a seance, and whatever it is willing to materialize or show itself. But agreeing that all this stuff should be investigated doesn't make me a debunker or a skeptic. I'm just very wary and very aware that there's lots of people out there that use this as a way to make money out of people who aren't thinking straight. And I think that gives those with a genuine gift and those real experiences, it gives it a bad name. And I think that's why a lot of people under that umbrella are sometimes classed as, being a bit weird.
Also, because we're a much later generation, we have the benefit of expanding the dialogue outside that, beyond, the Walking Dead or the ghosts of departed souls. So we can also, like, you think about this corporeal and incorporeal debunking or fraudulency. The corporeal fraudulency would be like mediums who fake things, cold readers, that at seances and things like that. And then you have beyond that the incorporeal hoaxing, which would be demons pretending to be your Auntie Mary, this kind of thing. Now, he didn't have that, but we have that. And because of like the post-psychedelic era, we know that these entities can lie. There's an awful lot more information today about things like shamanism and spirit workings in the other world from indigenous cultures that wasn't available during his time. So, in some ways, the field is even more complicated, but it's actually, you have to almost like, it's almost shamanic debunking. You have to sort of like be careful in this world, shamanic skepticism, I should say, and then in the spirit world, you've got to be skeptical as well. That you're dealing with something that's legit and not pretending to be something else. So it's a shame that he never got to that level. But then again, it was a different time, and like everything else, those things were still emerging.
Yeah. And he was having a hard enough time with his peers and members of the society anyway. And maybe he did think about jinn and fairies, but just thought, what is the point in even bringing this to these people? Because I don't have the scientific background that these people have. They're not going to listen to me.
Also, remember the English witchcraft law was still an act, is still an act. So the the possibility of, talking about I'm contacting demons or spirits and stuff like that, that could probably land you in prison back then. So there's those elements too, especially as him being involved in the actual magic circle, which is kind of like a Freemasonry for stage magicians. I find it fascinating that both him and Harry Houdini, two Harrys, were both from the stage magic world, both fascinated by spiritualism and the paranormal, but both debunked it as well. Well, not debunked it, but like we're deeply skeptical is also Houdini, much more so. I mean, that story. But you wonder about what Conan Doyle was saying because because Conan Doyle threatening him or aware that if you debunk the spirit world, it kills you, it destroys you. There's like a vendetta back onto this plane. It's like Harry Houdini. I know he had his intestine had been damaged from he used to like fight fellas in pubs and stuff like that, and he used to say, "Punch me as hard as you can in the stomach," and he would brace his muscles. But some guy just did it without him having time to brace, and then he went into the water tank, and that's what caused the rupture and caused him to drown. Now, but you could easily just say, "Well, that was the fact he wasn't." A spirit was working through the guy who punched him when he wasn't ready. It was kind of like that thing. And H.P. Lovecraft was, again, he's like Crowley. He appears on this show, on Hocus Focus constantly. He wrote an essay with Harry Houdini called "The Cancer of Superstition," which was about all paranormal was bunk and everything like that, and it's only science and rationalism. And he came to an early death as well from a pretty gruesome cancer. So maybe when Conan Doyle was saying that, maybe he wasn't threatening, maybe he was genuinely warning that don't get on the wrong side of these spirits or that they'll come for you.
That's interesting about you saying about Lovecraft saying that there's only science and logic. Now, I know we always get back to this subject no matter what we talk about, but it's a big part of the world at the moment. What if, well, all those people that believe the science and they think that the science is the new religion, all those people are coming to a sticky end now as well.
Oh yes, they are, because there's that I fucking love science group which I've been reading for years, and 5 6 years ago, their Facebook page was absolutely flooded with thousands and thousands of people, all making fun of the paranormal, all this kind of thing. Well, the activity on that thing has dropped completely, and there's just the threads are just far less people involved. I wonder how many of them have been transubstantiated and taken by Mother Hydra's babies, because and even on a post on there recently where I was minding my own business, actually I was always polite in those forums, and someone was talking about showed about how megaliths were probably built using regular ropes and ladders, and I says, yeah, fair enough. Well, let's see you get this. And I showed them photographs that I had taken in Sardinia and places like that, and says, how did they get this to the top of a mountain weighing 30 tons and put it in a lintel slot above the ground on top of a mountain? And they all start saying aliens, ha ha ha, laughing and laughing. And I jokingly said, oh, maybe the fact that your neurology has been destroyed by the what, I spelled it out correctly. Well, I thought I was going to be savaged. It was almost like you were in a family and you'd mentioned a family secret that you shouldn't say, and everyone goes, like cousin Lucy is pregnant and she's only 18 and doesn't have a boyfriend. It was like that kind of thing, that kind of thing in the old days. So that was a very interesting reaction. So yes, I think there's a distinct possibility that if you go to war against the supernatural, maybe, just maybe, supernatural goes to war against you.
Very possible because most of the demographic who took the prickly pear were, or at least most of those that were saying you should do it and you shouldn't be allowed out in society without it, those that were enforcing it, most of those people were the types of people that thought the paranormal was a load of rubbish.
Yeah, and they believed that government was a god and science was a god. Like I'm still astounded by that page where they were calling for the army to shoot the teenagers at the Spanish Arch in Galway for breaking curfew, and 90% of those counts stopped posting in late 2021, just vanished. So yeah, I mean, I was talking to Lou Collins today on a radio show, and she brought it up. Did you feel like the prickly pear years were spiritual warfare? And I said, Lou, they were nothing else. And I maintain that belief absolutely 100% now to this day. So maybe Conan Doyle was not being malicious, but being benevolent to Harry Price.
And another thought that came to me while you were saying that, the people that think that the government is God and that science is God and it rules the world, if you go by the rules of reincarnation, then government and science do not rule the world. Spiritual forces do, because that very act of passing over and going in the life between lives and then coming back here on that cycle, then that is beyond science and beyond government. That's a spiritual, not a law, but a spiritual process. So I think spiritual forces are what govern this world.
Well, I was just thinking about that today quickly before we finish. I picked up a seed and I said, how is this piece of nothing, if I put it in water, springs into a living being as a plant? That just cannot be the water that's doing that. Yeah, it's the water that's making it happen, but where's that life force coming from? So to me, I find it the other way around, that the concept of a mechanized planet is completely bonkers, not the spiritual one. And I think Harry Price, who was alive today, would probably say the same.
Totally. So that's Harry Price with his colourful personality and a desire for the spotlight. And it might have raised questions about how seriously his peers took him, but whether Harry deserves the title of one of the greatest paranormal investigators of all time is still open to discussion with a lot of people, and opinions differ on that. But he was undeniably one of the best paranormal investigators, I believe, has been brought into the spotlight in the early 19th century. And as far as I'm concerned, his legacy still lives on to this day.
Top man, Harry Price.
Go, Harry.
We should make a list of the Hocus Pocus heroes of the 40th.
I'm going to write that down right now.
That would be a good fit project to work on, and Harry Price would definitely be on that list.
Like the BBC's 100 Greatest Britons, we could have the
100 Greatest Forteans.
Hocus Focus Forteans. Fabulous.
Probably a documentary down the road.
Yes. For this week's folk horror, we are reviewing The Earth versus the Flying Saucers, directed by Fred F. Sears and featuring the stop motion effects of Ray Harryhausen. And it's a typical 1950s sci-fi B-movie capturing the fascination with and the fear of the unknown at the time. And it was released in 1956 during the height of the Cold War tensions. And it's sort of aimed towards the collective imagination of that generation haunted by the thought of an extraterrestrial invasion. And the story is about the Earth under attack by hostile alien forces. And Dr. Russell Marvin, played by Hugh Marlowe, is a scientist. And he and his new wife, played by Carol Joan Taylor, experience a flying saucer on the way to work, as you do. And after it goes away, they're unsure if they imagined it and they don't know what to do. I mean, how they could think they imagined it. It was bloody huge. But anyway, they're unsure what to do because nobody at the military base would have believed them without any proof. But they inadvertently had the tape recorder running when the incident happened. So they take this as proof to the superiors. And the scientist was working on a satellite project at the time called Starhook, which was not unlike Starlink. And all the satellites in this Starhook had fallen from space back down to Earth, and he suspected it might be alien interference. And eventually, the aliens make themselves known, and a meeting set up, and they want to take over the Earth because their own solar system's been destroyed, and their protective suits are the only thing that's keeping them alive at the moment. And they demand to meet up with the Earth's leaders, and there are saucers showing up in all major cities all over the world. And in true Hollywood style, one even lands on the White House lawn. So the Earth is in a battle against the flying saucers, and the aliens reveal their sinister plan to absorb human knowledge by uploading the consciousness of captured individuals into their computers, which I thought touched on the idea of transhumanism and the manipulation of humans through mind control. And you do wonder as the film progresses how the aliens are going to be able to be defeated. But our hero, Dr. Marvin, discovers something about the aliens' protective suits and the material that the saucers are made from, and he builds a sonic weapon to destroy them. And the humans discover that once the aliens are outside the protective field of the saucers, they're as vulnerable as the humans are. And it's an enjoyable film. And I think one that you'll recognise in many films of the same genre who've took inspiration from it, especially Independence Day and Mars Attacks. And I enjoyed Ray Harryhausen's stop motion effects, and for the time they were pretty cool. And he thought he brought the flying saucers to life with a strange kind of menacing vibe, the way they moved, and they had this weird mechanical sound. And I think him being involved in that made it much more frightening for the audiences of that time. And when I watched it last week, I put myself in the time of the 1950s and I watched it from the perspective of being in that time rather than comparing it to the movies of now. And that gives it another layer as well. And I thought it had a hauntological atmosphere in there, in the sense that it was kind of heightened by the 1950s black and white backdrop, where the Cold War paranoia was in the collective psyche at the time. And visually, that fear of the unknown, which could be symbolized by the flying saucers, I thought reflected the societal anxieties of the time as well. And another couple of points I want to make is that the film did actually go into some ahead of its time concepts, such as the transhumanism, with the aliens attempting to, well, not attempting, they actually did it, uploading human consciousness into their machines. And also, they said that time is experienced differently outside of normal human consciousness, which was why the moment the humans went onto the saucer, they were miles above the Earth within seconds looking down at it on a monitor. And while on the ship, Dr. Marvin and his team can't feel their pulses or any heartbeats. And the aliens say that this was because the aliens exist in the moments between human heartbeats, which I thought was a really interesting idea too. Despite first appearances, it's despite first appearances of it just being a 1950s sci-fi movie, there was actually a lot of interesting stuff sort of hidden between the lines within the overall story. And it was an eerie, black and white sci-fi film, and it gets an 8 out of 10 from me because it was nostalgic and entertaining. And while the special effects might seem dated by today's standards, I think the film still has all the charm of that bygone era. And it reminded me a little bit of Mars Attacks, which I also like. And it has that kind of vibe to it, but without the humour. I think Mars Attacks might have been some kind of tribute to it. I don't know. But it was just a great piece of 1950s science fiction, and it was great for an evening's entertainment.
Yeah, I liked it more than I thought I would, and I'd give it 8 out of 10 too. I'd never seen it until I'd watched it on per your recommendation, And I didn't watch the black and white version. I watched the Turner Classics colorized version, which was fine. It's some films should never be colorized, like Casablanca or The Maltese Falcon or Scarlet Street, because they're clearly film noir films. But this one worked because there's lots of desert scenes and stuff in it. The colorization was very tastefully done. Now, I didn't relish watching it because I don't like American sci-fi from that period. It tends to be kind of childish or full of shallow allegories, like the Angry Red Planet and the original invaders from Mars. It tends to be about Russians, the Soviets, and that kind of thing. And The Day the Earth Stood Still is a kind of a Christian homage. Klaatu and all that stuff. It's about really about the return of Jesus kind of thing. So it plays on things, very almost infantile stories. But having said this one I couldn't figure out what this film really was saying. There was, I'll tell you what I think it was at the end. I think if it wasn't propaganda, they definitely got money or input from the military industrial complex. And I'll tell you why. Firstly, for a B movie, Ray Harryhausen would have been very expensive to hire, and just for the logistics of it alone. And so they put in quite complex special effects. I had seen the scene where the flying saucer crashes into the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And that was that part at the end. Probably the Battle of Washington, D.C. probably went on a bit too long. The film story, yeah, there was things in there that were ahead of their time, like the downloading of the consciousness and how they showed it, where the brain becomes transparent, that through the head. I thought that was very well done. I thought the aliens looked brilliant. I thought that was a fantastic way to protect. They were almost like ants walking upright in their spacesuits, and I thought they were quite impressive, actually, the aliens. And the flying saucers, I thought the special effects were fine, even if they're dated. They did the job. The stop motion thing probably isn't the best way to depict a flying saucer on a spinning and moving, because there is a slight jitteriness. There's other ways. If there was film, there's other ways of doing that work much better. Having said that, no complaints really, because they wanted lots of buildings being smashed and crashed into and things like that. Thought the acting was fine. Thought the story was good. Now I think why I think it was probably got military money. I think the film's made as a response to Roswell. I think what happened was, it's very difficult for us to understand just how traumatized Americans were by Sputnik, and the Russians getting the first orbital space station over the world. Americans actually believed that the Russians would be shooting weapons at them from space within a few weeks. They were so fearful, and they used to go outside at night and look at this satellite going overhead, a man-made object in space, and the Russians got there first. This was deeply traumatic to the Americans. The Russians are, like, even today, they're always full of surprises of what they can do. And so this film, they made a big effort of telling you how many satellites the US got up, which isn't true. They even showed lots of real military footage of rockets, Werner von Braun's V2 modified rockets at JPL all taking off, and this kind of thing. And I think that the film had an element of saying, if the Russians or aliens invade, America will find a way to get them. We'll always come up with technology to defeat them. And they came with an ultrasonic weapon, which I thought was an interesting idea. I do think there was tremendous paranoia among, like, normie America in those days over Russians and even over aliens. Roswell, I believe, was deliberately staged to let Americans believe that the USA had alien technology, and no matter what the Russians did, the Americans would have the real stuff and get them, and always had to protect themselves or get the Ruskies and this kind of thing. So yeah, I give it an 8 out of 10. Very enjoyable, very watchable, good cast. The couple, the scientist and his wife, they were likable. They weren't obnoxious like they can tend to be. There was no superfluous characters. like a kid or anything like that they bring in just to go, golly gee, like getting a lot of American films, and I was waiting for that. That's why I don't like I like British dystopian sci-fi from that period because it's so grim, and that's what I like, being a weirdo. But yeah, 8 out of 10, very enjoyable. Probably some people think it's dated. I think it's dated in all the right ways. It's not stupid. It's not corny. It's definitely a better film than the Angry Red Planet Invader, the original Invaders from Mars, and the original the Day the Earth Stood Still. What I liked about it too is that, and this is what made me think it was kind of a public service film. There was no poetic kind of, there was no kind of cinema essence to a cinematic artistic license. Like at the end of the Invaders from Mars, the little kid is running away thinking of all his family and friends who've been taken over by aliens. Very artistic, that kind of a thing. And there's lots of like kind of arty-farty language in the day the day the earth stood still. And I thought this was, very mature in a kind of a matter-of-fact left brain way. So yeah, the Earth versus the Flying Saucers really should be called USA versus Flying Saucers. But yeah, I enjoyed the film, and definitely worth watching. And of that period of American flying saucer movies, I think the best one, yeah, the best of all of them that I've seen so far.
At first, I thought the title was a bit corny. The film was definitely a lot better than the title gives you the impression of. But then
Yeah,
thinking about it, the title works really well because now, nowadays, you'd see that title and you'd think, oh, that looks a load of crap. I'm not going to bother with that. But back then, that title would have had those paranoid normies needing to see that movie because the
yeah,
Earth versus the flight. It was like a newspaper headline. Earth versus the flying saucers. It was like, whoa, we need to watch this just in case. Could save our lives. It was that kind of thing. So I think it got a corny title like that because it was like a tabloid news headline of the
yeah.
time.
And they did credit a scientist in India for developing these ultrasonic weapon. So it wasn't all, America, fuck yeah, kind of thing. They had that too as well. I think that's a brilliant point you just made. I never thought about that, but you're right. It does appeal to them. That would have been like shitting bricks, waiting for either aliens or. Remember, this is the period of Adamski and people like that, and the initial flying saucer books, the decades leading up to like the Mothman and stuff like that. In sort of like I classify that period. It starts with Roswell and ends with the Mothman at Point Pleasant, and that's right. This is right in the middle of that, and so yes, it does. The beginning opening of it was very much like a public service film, more than a movie trying to be. In recent decades, people have seen these things that have become known as flying saucers, and they even meant the Foo Lights, the Foo Fighters. They even mentioned the Foo thing of these like incandescent lights that seem to respond to consciousness or humans looking at them. I thought that was a really neat part. That is, they didn't really explain what the Foo Lights were. There's one part where it appears in the laboratory, and they shoot it with a gun, and it comes down to show you it's not like this is an animal or something. It's not a piece of light. It's actual has substance. So that yeah, it's full of surprise. I'd say there's one thing about the film. It's full of surprises that I didn't expect.
I think the only corny bit was at the beginning when they were in the car, but they were scientists. So it was the mindset when the great big thing, I mean, it was huge and it came down, it was literally a couple of centimeters off the bonnet of the car, hovering and making a funny noise. And then it went away and they pull over. Did you see that? Did that just happen? No. Did we imagine that? And it's like, really?
A
It's
lot of
right
America,
there.
but a lot of it. That's the reason why the car part is included. A lot of American films in those years started with a scene with a man and a woman in a car. Why? Because they were watching them at the drive-in. And so it was all ready to take the person in the drive-in sitting in their car and transform them into the movie. You'll see that a lot of American films, and right up in the Hitchcock's period, a lot of them start with a couple in a car. and that's about. The sort of like to point to the NPCs in the audience is like, this could be you.
Those two characters did redeem themselves though, because they weren't closed-minded after they got the video, the tape recorder recording of the sounds. They were very open-minded and trying to convince
Yeah,
people what was going on.
as well as scientists. Yeah, and I felt sorry for her father. Like there was that scene. That it's funny. There's that scene. And you see, this must make me think it was like propaganda again. They get abducted on the UFO lands on the beach, and it goes, "All of you come on board." And one of them's a copper, and one of them is like somebody else. I don't know what he is, but there's like the different strata of the different classes, and then you have like they ask the question, and the NPC guy goes, "Who won the most World Series?" To show you that that's all working class minds are capable of, that kind of a thing. Yeah. And then the slightly more educated guy goes, "Who was the first American president?" It's like the class system is and the level of education is reinforced in that scene. Then that's like the every that I found kind of funny. That was the only corny part in it. But I did feel sorry for her father, the way they drained his brain and then drew and they said, "We will let him go and we're done with him." And they just dropped the poor bastard out of spaceship from about 200 feet, and he falls dead into the forest. And that was awful, that scene. But yeah, Earth versus the Flying Saucers is not a bad movie at all, and I would definitely recommend it.
One of the other interesting things on the beach scene was before they all went into the flying saucer, the policeman said, I'm not going in there. And the scientist guy said, well, actually, you're just better off doing as you're told and don't ask any questions.
Yeah, the class system again. Or else you get the aliens shooting at them. I loved how the aliens shoot the ones. Their two arms like that.
Yeah, they vaporized them. They had vaporizers.
Oh, I did laugh though when the scientist put the helmet on his head. He looked like a gigantic penis.
Well, yeah, I did. Yes, I wasn't going to bring that in, but yeah, it did. It was like a big, uncircumcised one, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I shall.
Yes, a large black uncircumcised vibrator.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that might have been done on purpose I think that might have been the prop guys having a laugh.
Yeah, I think so. And the director said, leave it in. Middle America won't get it, and the censors will let it go.
I seem to remember, well, actually, an episode of Star Trek in the first series when Spock had gone off into some underground caves and the alien was coming towards him and he broke off a stalactite.
Yes,
and he had it in his hand, and it was literally a cock and balls made out of polystyrene. Yeah. Yeah, if you decide to watch it, it's out there on YouTube. So, depending on which country you're in, certainly in the UK, it was available on YouTube. It's certainly worth a watch. Go and give it a watch and let us know what you thought of it in the comments.
And I know in Ireland, the colour version is told, maybe it's in other countries as well, but the colour version definitely works. It's not garish or poor. It definitely adds to the film. Well, the weather has been fluctuating in the actual climatic sphere. We've had an unbelievable amounts of rain here. You probably heard my VON last Saturday in the middle of a storm, and now it's bright and sunny. So now here is Sarah to tell us about the psychic hygiene. Although it's not the psychic weather, we can still get viruses from poor weather. And how do we protect ourselves from psychic viruses? It's over to Sarah with the psychic hygiene tips.
This week's psychic hygiene is very appropriate for the upcoming silly season. Now, I know that many people suffer at this time of year, and while positivity is generally encouraged for mental and emotional health, it's important to recognise that an excess of artificial or forced positivity can quickly become toxic. The pressure to maintain a facade of everlasting cheerfulness can lead to the suppression of genuine emotions and create an unrealistic expectation for yourself and those around you. Fake positivity is often characterized by the constant denial or avoidance of negative emotions, and it may result in emotional suppression where genuine concerns and issues are overlooked or dismissed in favour of projecting a relentlessly positive image. And this not only creates internal conflict, but can strain relationships when authenticity is sacrificed for the sake of maintaining a facade. It's okay to experience a range of emotions, both positive and negative. Authenticity in expressing emotions allows for a healthier mindset and creates genuine connections with others. But constantly suppressing negative feelings may provide a temporary illusion of positivity, but it doesn't address the root causes of discomfort or dissatisfaction. And being honest with yourself about how you really feel and allowing yourself the space to experience that is important for well-being. This doesn't mean dwelling on negativity, but acknowledging and dealing with emotions in a constructive manner. It's the difference between a forced smile and a sincere smile. And people generally appreciate authenticity over superficial cheerfulness. Letting go of the need to appear constantly positive is liberating. Everyone faces challenges, and it's okay to go through both highs and lows without pretending. So celebrate achievements and joys genuinely, but don't shy away from addressing difficulties. You can address things without becoming fixated on a particular issue, and true well-being comes from a balanced perspective. So strive for a balance between genuine positivity that acknowledges challenges, and that is my psychic hygiene suggestion for this week.
Yeah, lose your ass and the rest will follow. Uh, the authenticity thing, it's really a natural law thing, isn't it? Being a true self. Now, there are times in social situations where decorum overrides that and protocol, and you might have to bury your emotions. But in general, if you're able to balance your emotions when describing something, talking about something, dealing with something, like it usually is okay. I think a lot of people, because we'll say in the alternative scene, they're not many people in the alternative scene are not very good at describing new information to their families, which will probably happen at Christmas and stuff like that, because they tend to be almost like evangelical. That comes from the Christian mind virus thing. You need to convert everybody, but if they don't bring it up, if someone brings it up, talk to things, and to be neutral, always be measured, and change the subject as soon as you think you've taken somebody into a difficult area, because that's part of respecting another person's level of psychic integration, I guess, and you'll be fine. It's like will again. It's how you force your will on others is really something you should always consider the other party first. And being true to yourself and your authentic personality is really just staying neutral, being cordial, and speak when appropriately, and shut up when appropriate. And you'll find that people will actually open up to you, and conversations do become better. But yeah, I think a lot of people who have like families that meet at this time of year. You might have someone who's woken up to a lot of new information in the alternative world. It's not going to work. They're desperate to tell others, or they're desperate for a conversation with somebody about it in real life. And often the worst person in the world to do that with is a family member during Christmas or something like that, because you're not really being your authentic self when you think about it. You're being your forceful, almost bullying self. So yeah, I mean, I'm a great believer in hold the thing inside you, and eventually people will come to you and ask you questions about it. The term knowledge is power works both ways. It can either be empowering in terms of, lifting up your own cognitive reinforcements and expanding your own knowledge base, or it could be also power, like an explosion, and you don't want that either.
You know what I find with that it makes me very, very uncomfortable is when somebody asks me a question about something and I know it's a loaded question. I know I'm walking into a trap. I know I'm going to get ambushed. They're not asking out of genuine interest. They're asking because they know what the answer's going to be and they've already got the defense set up and they're going to, I don't like that at all.
Unfortunately, that has never happened in my life, because I definitely have a look in my eyes of like, it's just you fucking try, And I think, I mean, Enoch Crane once at an event said that, the last person you want to try and argue with on this earth is Thomas Sheridan.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting actually nowadays, if I see it coming, I just
It's
whatever.
it's never done to me.
Yeah.
I've seen it done to other people, and I think it's very, very rude to do that. So if you're on the other side of the coin, don't be rude and do that to people.
Yeah, getting stronger now anyway. Don't feel the need to have to answer now. Just I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know, or I act stupid. I don't know.
Well, I do that a lot. Like, if it's something that's really controversial, I'll say, I haven't really looked into it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, don't know enough information about it. Yeah,
Yeah, silence is golden in that in those cases.
a lot of the flat earthers try it, don't they? Try to lure you into a conversation. Try to lure you into a conversation, and it's a trap. It's not a discussion about what you believe and what they believe. Well, what you know and what they believe. It's a trap to start an argument to debunk you. But anyway,
Again, it's rude. It's rude.
yeah. These rules to conversate. The art of conversation, I think, is lost.
Yeah, because the internet's all about reinforcement, and they treat knowledge like a football team. So the flat earthers are like, Man United, and the Totarians are like Man City, and they all defend their own little turf. I won't argue with both of them because they're both tickos, so I just don't go there. I mean, if someone wants to argue with I'm insulted by that. Like, if they want to argue the flat earth, I feel like I'm having a debate with a stone. There's nothing to debate.
Yeah.
Don't push your religion on me. And
Yeah.
a lot of them are terribly evangelical, and there's a lot of Christianity bullshit around that.
Yeah, you find they don't talk to you, they talk at you.
Yeah, same with the simulation theory bunch. Like, I've had a few arguments. Well, arguments are just like, well, stop kind of thing with them. The simulation theory is just basically original sin, that we're somehow damned and we're controlled by an outside force and have no free will. When every single experiment within quantum physics shows the exact opposite, that reality is directly, causality is directly related to human observation or personal observation. So, the theory is like completely wrong, unless you're one, a transhumanist who wants to control everybody, or two, an evangelical Christian who believes in original sin, literally, and has just transferred it into something new.
Or an evangelical truther who's watched a few YouTube videos.
Yeah, but they tend to be like a lot of the UFO people, like on the next story that I'll be doing. A lot of people involved in this stuff have addictive personalities. I have found that. I know a lot of people, there's the old adage, and it is true, how many like winos and drunks end up being born again Christians. Well, a lot of them become like mad UFO heads. A lot of them, like, and that kind of thing. They transfer the addiction into something else. I can remember I went UFO hunting, well, not hunting, but looking in this area with this bunch of people. And there was this one guy there, and I knew right away he was going to see UFOs everywhere because he was chain smoking. Like that. God, look, if he finished one cigarette, another one coming, that kind of thing. And I could tell by that was the kind of personality he had. And literally, you'd see a light in a field in the distance, and he'd go, look, alien flying saucer, like, and I say, no, that's a farmer's tractor. And farmers often work at night because they do day jobs, and they spread slurry and or look for cows and stuff like at night. And they drive around the tractor. That's a tractor. And he goes, oh, okay. And then it comes back from another side of the field. And he goes, and the same tractor. And he goes, look, an alien, alien. So I could see that was part of his addictive personality.
And wanting to see something so the night's not wasted.
No, with no, we get thrilled from it. They get a fix, a high, that kind of thing. And it was always an alien. It was like the Barge pub down there in, where all the crop circles area in the south of England. And the Barge pub, I often thought was a perfect place for them all to meet because they're all. And I mean, that's love. It's lovely down there in that part of England. And the Barge pub is, it's a great place to visit. It's lots of fun, and the beers all have names like Alien Abduction and things like that. And it is, and. But there's a lot of people down there. It's like Roswell. They're absolutely sure they're going to see something that night, but they've been on the piss in the pub all day, So.
Yeah. But yes, going back to conversations, the art of conversation and the art of discernment is definitely dissolving.
Yes, discourse is a rare thing these days. And I think on a lot of the alternative internet you do have conversations. Even on other stuff that's not like 14, like you'll hear someone like Christian Morris when he's talking to somebody like John Waters, they have a proper conversation.
Yes.
That's the appeal. That's the appeal.
And his conversation with Richie Allen, that was really good as well.
Yeah, just straightforward. And I think there's a great hunger for that out there.
Yeah. It's actually nothing better than listening to a conversation when there's rat-a-tat-tat going, they're bouncing off each other. I think that's fantastic.
Or just predetermined parameters like like that BBC show Questions and Answers. There was more plants in that audience than there is in the London Botanic Gardens. So, you get that a lot of those shows, the predetermined and pre-scripted questions and answers. And that's another reason why people have forgotten how to do conversation.
It's definitely an art form, a spontaneous conversation around a topic.
Yeah, and we used to be the kings of that here in Ireland. And sadly, I've noticed that's vanished as pub culture has vanished. So
sign of the times.
It's depressing, in that sense. And our second topic tonight is one Sarah had mentioned to me. She said, would you want to look into the Falkirk Triangle in Scotland? And I said, I never even heard of that, but yeah, what's it about? And she told me, well, it's like, a classic UFO hotspot. And I says, yeah, definitely. I have heard something of UFO flaps quite common in Scotland during the 1990s. And sure enough, I had heard of it, but I knew it under a different name. I knew it under the Bonnie Bridge UFO sightings. Now, Bonnie Bridge is a village about 5 miles from Falkirk, which is a larger town. And the Falkirk Triangle is denoted by a triangle formed by Falkirk in the north, Edinburgh in the east, Glasgow in the west, and back. So it's basically the most populated area of Scotland. So that would probably just increase the number of UFO sightings anywhere. Now, I immediately took an interest in this because the very first time I was ever in that part of the world towards Falkirk, and particularly going towards Stirling, I felt I was in a very mystical place. There was something about the area there, the way the lowlands gave tremendous 360 visibility, and in the distance you saw the Highlands of Scotland, like a wall of mountains, and you were really given the notion of a separation of two different places. So I looked into the Falkirk Triangle, and there's a very interesting story. It's the classic thing. People who live in the area are seeing strange lights. They're filming strange lights. They're having strange experiences involving missing time. In fact, one of them I do remember from years and years ago being on the Arthur C. Clarke Mysterious World thing about a forestry worker, Scottish Travis Walton, being abducted by an alien spaceship or a strange craft in the middle of a forest, and his clothes were ripped, and the police had said he's telling the truth, and something had lifted him up into the air. Now, again, forestry worker, fairies, we're in that period, we're in that area, we're in Scotland, for God's sake. the land of fairies and folklore. Now, I'm not really going to bother with outlining individual cases. Sarah might have something to add to that in her rebuttal or addition. But because they're all the classics, missing time, strange lights, uh, unexplained movements. Are they military secrets? Are they fairy lights? Are they will-o'-the-wisps? Are they indeed alien visitors? Now, like everywhere else to do with this stuff, the immediate thing is to say it's aliens, and that becomes the dominant narrative. Now, the area I believe was fairly disadvantaged. There was it was done well during the Industrial Revolution, and since the Industrial Revolution declined, there's lots of unemployment and stuff like that. So people would take up UFOs as a hobby, something to do, spotting them. And there would be also people who were working day jobs, and I often find these people tend to have addictive personalities, like I said, and they would go for 8 or 9 hours a night looking for spaceships, and every night until they were exhausted. And eventually they would see something. And the question is, did they bring that thing into manifestation themselves? So these are questions that are never asked in places like the Falkirk Triangle and these UFO hotspots. Now, as I said, the epicenter of all this activity is a small village of about 5,000 people called Bonnie Bridge. Now, there's a guy in the town who's actually was a councillor named Billy Buchanan. And Billy Buchanan was actually elected into the council to find out what the hell was going on in the 1990s, as there was 300 UFO sightings a year, making Bonnie Bridge the world's #1 UFO hotspot in the whole world, way ahead of like Roswell or Area 54 or anywhere like that in terms of numbers of sightings. The council took it apparently so serious. Now, when I first heard about this, I think, oh, the council is trying to make Bonnie Bridge into a UFO tourist center to bring the tourists in. Clever. But then it didn't seem to be that way. They seemed to be genuinely serious. And this guy, Billy Buchanan, seems like quite a man with tremendous integrity and is driven. And he's quite bitter about it now. He went for years, he would go down to London to petition the British government to please investigate what's going on in Bonnie Bridge. And of course, who did they send up? Well, not directly, they ignore him, but who did they send up sort of through the back door is none other than the MI5 agent, Nick Pope. Now, Nick Pope, you may know him from Ancient Aliens. He's still on the circuit today. Nick Pope's purpose is to destroy any alternative investigation of the UFO phenomena. His job is to keep it spacemen and make sure they don't go off into looking into other areas, and to frustrate people, to tell them about things like the truth is coming out, disclosure, blah, blah, blah. And he strangely ridiculed the Bonnie Bridge events, saying he was seeing no proof of any kind of alien technology. That sounds to me like that's the main reason he exists. When they see something that I know for a fact that governments know these things are real. They've admitted it now. They've had to admit it, but they haven't got a clue what they are. And they know, and if they do have a clue, it's probably they know they are spiritual in nature or some kind of unknown form of consciousness, but they're perfectly happy with the general public to think alien spacemen, because that's a narrative they can control. If it goes into things like demons and jinn and fairies, they can't control that narrative. Nick Pope's job is to keep it spaceman, keep it alien. So he left this guy, Billy Buchanan, very, very frustrated. And Billy Buchanan, over the years, has accused him practically of being a government shill, which he probably is, and also said that people had been silenced. Now, Billy Buchanan comes across as a man of real sincerity, and he genuinely wants an answer what the hell are these 300 lights people are seeing every year. And he doesn't care if it turns out to be military, secret weapons. There are a lot of British military bases up in Scotland, particularly things like submarine bases and stuff like that. And some of the lights had been seen coming out of the sea nearby in the North Sea. But he just wants answers, and they frustrated him at every turn to the point where he's very bitter and very cynical about any political involvement with this subject. Quite rightly, I might add. Well done, Mr. Buchanan. You've crossed the first threshold. Now, as I said, this has 300 sightings a year just in Bonnie Bridge. And I wanted to learn about, like, Sarah has a good theory about these things happening near water. And I'm fully down with that. In fact, there's a lot more evidence coming out of that. And sure enough, it is on a meeting of waters. There's a river that runs through the town called Bonnie Water. And there's the Forth and Clyde Canal connecting the Firth of Forth and the River Clyde runs through the town as well. So you have the water thing, you have the meeting of the waters thing, you have the concept of the crisscrossing of the waters in the area. Remember, within folklore and magic, the meeting of the waters are places that are also seen similar to crossroads, where the veil happens. Now, I'm not a UFO researcher, okay? I'm an alternative folklorist, okay? So I go into it from a different angle. And the first thing I had to look at was the name Bonnie Bridge. Now, Bonnie Bridge is an Anglo translation or an Anglification of the Gaelic term Drutha Branach. Now, Drutha Branach, Drutha is bridge in Gaelic, either Scots Gaelic or Irish Gaelic. They're the same language, there's only difference in spelling. I could not find the word Branach anywhere. I could not find a meaning for it, except in Irish Gaelic, which is the same as Scots Gaelic because the Irish brought there. And this is where it gets interesting. It means a spirited boat, a boat to the spirit world. So a bridge to the boat to the spirit world. A boat of the soul, a boat of the experience, a boat of light. And what does this tell you? That was probably telling you that the ancient people who lived in Bonnie Bridge, which only grew up as a village in the Industrial Revolution, probably saw this too. And it's not named of a bridge over the water, it's named for a bridge and an experience. So I found that instantly a clue to work with. So we're in an area that probably has centuries, if not millennia, there's a Roman fort there, of this paranormal experience that they're now called the Falkirk UFOs or the Bonnie Bridge UFOs. And this, the fact that I'm probably the first person to look into the etymology of the name of the place and discover a clue in there shows you just how appalling the whole field of UFOlogy is. They're still looking for nuts and bolts spacecraft. It's still, even when you see the documentaries and the news reports on, they play the X-Files type music. They have like the classified, things. The only one, except for the Arthur C. Clarke Mysterious World one, where they gave it a genuinely proper, respect. But it just goes to show you that it took me 5 minutes of investigation of the meaning of the name of the town to find a whole new set of clues that were in an area that's a hotspot, like the Phoenix Lights, like the Ohio Valley around Point Pleasant. And these experiences have been going on forever. Now, they took off again in the 1990s. Why? Maybe because of consciousness generates them. We had the X-Files came out around that time. People in the area watching the X-Files, loads of TV shows like 14 TV, sightings, unsolved mysteries, dealing with UFOs, lots of UFO films. Someone sees a light that they can't explain. Someone videotapes a light. And suddenly these things are generated by the locals, or they're brought into they're amplified, and a phenomenon that's already there is amplified, these lights. That in ancient times, I think a lot of the artwork on the megaliths might have something to do with this as well. There's lots of strange lights always seen around megaliths and things like this. And maybe the reason why some of them are built there. So I think it's a real story. It's a real deal. And it's left men like Billy Buchanan deeply frustrated because he thinks that the story is about the government hiding the truth about aliens from him, because every UFO investigator he's ever met is Roswell, or, if you go to these UFO events, you have to see them to believe them. They're not really conferences, they're church. A guy will stand on stage and go, "You probably never heard of Roswell." And in 1940, and then he tells the story of Roswell. And the people in the audience have heard this a billion times. And he tells it with no variation and no new things, and they're perfectly happy. That they're going to church, a Rendlesham Forest down in England. They got they get it's church to them. They want to hear the same stories told over and over again, like children's bedtime stories. But as soon as you're somebody who comes in there, like Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and she goes, "No, they're not spaceships; they're spiritual beings." You get booed off the stage at UFO conferences by these people who want to hear these spacemen stories again. So that's Bonnie Bridge is a place that's firmly on my radar now, and I'm determined to get up there and do a proper 14 investigation and not a Nick Pope determined parameter investigation. And I'd like to meet Billy Buchanan and explain to him that things are a lot different than what he may be being forced and is to believe, and his frustration is coming from these parameters that he's been told it all exists in this strange thing. The government knows, and I'm not telling you, and that's why you're frustrated. And the reason why the government does that is because these governments know fully well what me and Sarah knows, and you guys in the tribe know, that the UFO thing is far more complicated than they want any of us to believe. So the Falkirk Triangle falls in an area that's full of paranormal activity. It's full of megaliths. It's full of folklore, and interesting enough, it's full of the parts of the Britain where the most persecution of witches ever happened. I find that quite interesting, the phenomena too. So it's an area of witchcraft, and Rosslyn Chapel is right in the middle of it, one of the strangest places on earth. And parts of that place have strange feelings all around Lockerbie. I know about the crash and all that stuff and everything, but around that part of Scotland, there's very, very strange vibes and energy, and it's hard to explain. Not dark or negative. It just feels like you're in a different kind of reality. And when you go around certain areas there, and sat navs don't work and this kind of thing. So the Falkirk Triangle really should be called the Bonnie Bridge event. It is a real paranormal thing as far as I'm concerned. These people are sincere and telling the truth. The videos, a lot of them look legit. They are very strange. They're very similar to what they call spook lights all in the United States. And it deserves further investigation without the alien possessed consciousness. What do you think, Sarah?
Well, my thoughts were, well, this first thing that struck me, or I thought about, was the geological features around the area. There's a lot of archaeological places around there, including the Chasefield Wood Rock Art. That site's got 3 cup and ring motifs and a lot of other rock art that no one knows the origins of. There's a lot of history around the area. There's possible high quartz content. There's standing stones. That could indicate Fey activity, like you said. Could be a hinterland for various phenomena. You've got the Falkirk helix, which has got the kelpies, those massive horse head sculptures. You've got Stirling Castle, and you've got the, how do you pronounce this? You've got the Antonini Wall, which was a Roman fortification. It's full of woodland and green spaces, and that's often associated with Fae. We've got the River Forth, which you mentioned, and we've already said in previous episodes that bodies of water play a role in paranormal activity. It's an elevated area known as the Brais Amar, and that's full of rolling hills and wild terrain, lots of hills and valleys, and that also can contribute to paranormal phenomena in hinterlands, especially where there's towns on the outskirts.
And the term Bray in Gaelic means a clear, full view. And if you look at the geography of the area, it's an ideal place for astronomy, and it's an ideal place for spotting strange objects in the sky, because you've got very flat landscape all the way around you for miles around. They don't call the lowlands for nothing, you know.
And another thing that interested me was there is a fault line that runs through there called the Kinnaird Fault Line, situated quite near that fault line. It runs through central Scotland, and fault lines are known for seismic activity, and that can influence the landscape and phenomena. So it could be the landscape that attracts what's going on. Another thought that I had was, are the military bases hidden away up there? Could they be running some kind of experiments, or maybe even have they opened up some kind of portal? Is there high-tech military aircraft flying around? And if there is, why is that not public knowledge? Then there's the story of the two men from Falkirk who actually were driving home one night and they drove underneath the massive flying object, and they talk about how everything turned black and they felt like they were being lifted up into the air. And is it possible, like in the movie that we reviewed earlier, had they been temporarily shifted into another dimension and maybe the consciousness is different where they were? And that explains why they can't remember much. Couple of people who've experienced the UFO sightings there have had hypnotic regression sessions, and a few of them went on to reveal some weird stuff, strange figures and medical instruments and needles being poked in the eye.
Classic,
Sounds,
yeah.
sounds like your typical alien abduction scenario. Then the sightings of these things hovering over cars and rooftops, especially in the early 90s and around the time of Tony Blair's new Labour government. Is that relevant in any way? I don't know. And Councillor Buchanan tried to get three prime ministers involved, which was David Cameron, Tony Blair, and John Major over a number of years,
And two
asking,
Scottish first ministers as well, and they ignored them.
yeah, nothing ever came of it. But I think I'm leaning towards it possibly being, just to throw another aspect into the mix, it could be another dimension next to ours, and perhaps there's some kind of portal there. And either these things from different dimensions are coming through purposefully or inadvertently, and what we're seeing is the crossover of that.
Yeah, I mean, the name Bonnie Bridge translated as the bridge to the light, the bridge to the ship to the light. So there you go. Like, just in this little intro we've done, we have explored the Bonnie Bridge event in far more detail than 30 years of ufologists and thousands of UFO investigators have done in 30 years, because we just simply stepped outside the parameters set by the likes of Nick Pope and the Discovery Channel and all that other nonsense, and brought in all this other stuff. Like, I just posted on Facebook today, a guy from the Discovery Channel contacted me about a year ago and said we were doing a show on ancient sites and the mysteries of them, and he said, "Do you have any things you think you could add to the show?" And I says, "Yeah, well, I think the geometric shapes of many of these sites cause a shift in consciousness." And then I said, well, he says, "Tell me more." And then I said, "Well, what would make great TV is if I brought the cameras to the site and I showed you how they had caused these effects." We were talking to Neil Rushton recently, and he was talking about how West Kennett had that effect, that they, and on both of us, it was a more spectacular result for him, though. And I said, it's like the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Dream in the Witch House. And he goes, "What?" And it goes, the writer H.P. Lovecraft, The Dream in the Witch, the house is built with non-Eleusinian geometry, and the fact that it's built with unorthodox geometry causes a transformation in consciousness. And that's what I think also happens at the megalithic sites. And we could fuse the two together. And I could hear the silence on the other end of the phone, and the guy going, "What the hell is this guy on about?" And then he says, okay, I'll get back to you. I never heard from him ever again. And then he produces a TV show where he says that they're the megaliths like Newgrange are ancient flying saucers. So the control runs deep. They don't want any kind of further intellectual or other exploration into these things. Of course, you get in things like 14 times and all that stuff. Yeah, great there. But that's a ghetto. That's a ghetto that doesn't penetrate into the world of ufology and the paranormal investigation in general as well. And I think Bonnie Bridge, if anything, serves as a classic example of how the whole alien thing, contrary to adding to the canon of 40 and Forteana lore, has actually damaged it.
Something's going on up there,
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely. And
And
just
all
going,
those people, all the people they interviewed in those documentaries, they're incredibly sincere, incredible people. They come across as very legitimate and ethical men and women who are genuinely have seen and had experiences. I'd just like to clarify, Nick Pope is not in MI5. He was in the Ministry of Defense, my boo-boo. So, yeah, he was in the Ministry of Defense, MOD.
It does make you wonder if there is a correlation or a connection between the intelligence services in this and those people that mysteriously disappear who speak out about such experiences.
In different ways, yeah. Like I often wonder what happened to Rosemary Ellen Guiley and my other friend Susan Shepherd, who were talking about the Mothman thing in terms of fairy lore. And then the next thing, both of these women died within a few months of each other.
It's a similar situation with Carla Turner, who wrote a number of books about some horrific experiences she had with abductions. And her and her husband both suddenly got a fast-acting cancer that killed her within a matter of days. It killed them both, really.
Yeah, no, we're not mentioning or implying any individual involved in this. We're just speculating in an X-Files kind of way. It does make you wonder at times how much fact and fiction goes with it. You know, is there a smoking man or a cancer man? Do these characters really exist? And maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe they're predominantly there to control the narrative and the flow of information. But I'd certainly say that if there was ever any involvement between the military and these supernatural experiences that create what we call the UFO experience, I'd say, like the famous call from the guy who claimed to work at Area 51 onto the Art Bell show. And I still don't believe that's legit, because the second guy calling in didn't really sound like him. It sounded like someone trying to sound like him. But that was genuine terror from the other guy. I don't believe that was an act. And yeah, I mean, why not? Why wouldn't they? They kill people who stumble upon chemical weapons research and stuff like that. We know that. We know about all those scientists who worked for one company. I think it was Marconi in England, and every last one of them was murdered or found dead.
Not accusing anybody or saying anything, just putting out there that a lot of people within UFO circles who speak out about abduction a lot of them do tend to go missing.
Yeah,
Coincidence.
that's why I'd caution people, if you go to one of these conferences like Ancient Aliens and you've had some experience that may be too much to know, rather than running to one of the people on the stage bullshitting the audience about disclosure, I'd be more inclined to keep it to yourself and anonymously post it on the internet. You
Yeah.
really don't know, the old World War II thing: loose lips sink ships, and don't be that ship that gets sunk. I think people are very naive in the whole UFO thing. I've noticed that there's a lot of new agey type things that they're going to come and bring free energy and create a world of peace. And if anything, the evidence it shows us quite the opposite. You know how these experiences are often horrific experiences for people.
And not only that, Thomas, but those experiences, they tend to follow these people who experience them throughout the whole lives and running families and things like that. And if it is fae related or jinn related, then those entities are monitoring the abductees. And if, as an abductee, if you go blabbing off and telling every Tom, Dick, and Harry about what's been going on, then they may not appreciate that either, and that could come back on you on the next time they come to visit you.
Also, John Lennon died not long after he talked about having several UFO experiences in New York and had spoken about them quite candidly. The Hudson River is a hot spot, and he lived only a few blocks from it. And then the next thing, he's dead. And the people trying to make out, he was bumped off because he was anti-war. Maybe that is true. Maybe he could have been a figure to have been powerful in stopping things like the Iraq War and stuff like that. But I often wonder about that one too. Like, he was a guy that would, well, but he's an interesting guy, because his childhood, where he grew up in Liverpool, was very Fortean where he lived, and it probably wasn't until towards the end of his life he realized what kind of life he lived. But yeah, I would never go to a UFO conference, and I've had an experience that was specifically um, strange. I would not walk up to one of these, former government agent guy who's a whistleblower and tell them, because you don't know who you're talking to and if they're still on the payroll.
No, I wouldn't. I would keep that to myself.
And
Keep that
even
to
if
myself.
it's secret weapons, they're even, you'd be careful. You could be looking at a secret weapons program. They don't want anyone speaking out. But there's a lot more things to, remember Karen Silkwood's story, the film with Meryl Streep, where she was working in the power station I think it was in Pennsylvania. And the thing was like, they were washing people that got exposed, they were washing them with hoses and stuff like that and letting them out in public. And she mysteriously vanished. This Karen Silkwoods in the alternative field as well. You might stumble upon something. I'll be very careful. You know, in fact, anyone who's into the UFO thing, I would just say take a step back from it and try to think of it in a different way. Going to these conferences where they constantly reinforce the alien belief, all they're doing is putting you deeper into a labyrinth you're never going to escape from. And you're not developing knowledge, you'll end up just wanting validation. And that's not investigation, that's religion.
Yeah, it's important not to go talking to every Tom, Dick, and Harry about this, and it's a private thing anyway. That's quite a personal experience that you certainly is very traumatic, and you don't want ridiculing about either.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of cults involved in this stuff. Like we know that from Jacques Vallée's book, Messengers of Deception, how the intelligence services create UFO cults in order to get these people. And you know,
It's
to
it's
me,
that
the UFO thing is far stranger than any of the sort of mainstream assumptions about it, and any disclosure things. And disclosure is another thing. Disclosure is like Jesus coming back. He's not coming back, and you're not getting disclosure. This, and they desperately hold them on a string, saying, disclosure's coming, disclosure's coming. And many of those disclosure superstars are actually paid by the intelligence service to keep people in a disclosure holding pattern. And every so often that claim there's a big announcement, and it'll be a guy on stage saying the government are hiding stuff, but they won't actually tell you what it is. Yeah, it's like a junkie, making the a dealer making the junkie beg for his drug.
I think the underbelly of the whole UFO world is a lot
Mhm.
darker and slippier than the actual abduction experience itself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did a conference. I'm not going to say where it was, but that was a big that was 50% of the element, and I thought it would be comical and silly, but it actually gave me the creeps in a lot of ways. It actually, I didn't, I felt I was in the presence of something extremely dark.
It's just put me in mind of that cult leader. I don't remember his name. I think he was from the 60s, a strange looking face. He had a UFO cult.
There was loads of them.
Can't
Uh,
remember. It was some UFO
uh, there was
Jesus thing.
loads. There was loads of them. There was the Melchizedecs and all these kinds of group. Then there's the there's just so many of them. A lot of them are based in the south of France. The French Secret Service seem to be very, very interested. The Raelians, that's another one. And don't forget the Solar Temple, who were a Knights Templar kind of UFO cult. And they were all that murdered even children in both Switzerland and in southern France. And there was intelligence service, Swiss military all over that thing.
Definitely something weird going on up there. Don't know what it is. Can't say whether it's alien, demonic, fae, or what, but there's lots of similarities in all people's experiences around the world. And it
And if you live in Falkirk, Bonnybridge area, or anywhere in the triangle between Falkirk, Edinburgh, and Glasgow, tell us what you've seen. Am I the weirdo for having that strange feeling around Lockerbie, and was it just being brought on by the horrible disaster that happened there, or is there a strange energy in that part of Scotland? I thought there was, and I even I think there's an unusual sense of otherworldliness even in modern Scotland in that area. So let us know when you've seen anything, and if you know anybody up there, and that's definitely a place we're visiting in the future for a film or something.
Okay, I've got a few accounts here of the more famous sightings up within the Falkirk Triangle, and a lot of these were on those TV shows like the Arthur C. Clarke and the one with Michael Aspel. I forget what that's called. Do you remember that from the 90s? Forgotten what it's called. It used to be on for 20 minutes. Anyway, there was a family out for a walk on a March evening in 1992, and they said that they witnessed a basketball-sized blue light hovering on the back road going up to Bonnie Bridge, and they claimed to hear a sound similar to a door opening, followed by a howl. Then there was a video appeared of an orange oval light above Falkirk, which changed shape to become a white disc into the classic flying saucer shape, and then it just disappeared. And that was captured on film in October 1996. And then reported sightings became so prolific that Councillor Billy Buchanan lobbied three prime ministers, as we mentioned earlier, asking for an investigation, and he got nowhere with that. And then there have been many, many eerie accounts which range from seeing big black cigar-shaped objects to bright light crisscrossed by stripes of different colours, all thought to be misidentifications caused by planes, satellites, weather balloons, or planets, but some of them simply can't be explained. And so it goes on.
Yeah, all the classics, and I do think there was I do think the success of the X-Files TV show in the 90s actually led to a lot of UFO sightings. Firstly, people were out there looking because of it, and secondly, they may have also generated it. And I get the feeling that's what probably happened in Bonnie Bridge and places like that, as a generation of it, and also the Phoenix Lights in Phoenix, Arizona. So yeah, Bonnie Bridge, the bridge to the starboat, literally is what it translates to in the Gaelic. So, or the light boat. So there you go. It was, these things have been with us since the dawn of time, and they'll be with us in all different forms until thousands of years to come.
What's in the psychic weather this week? Is it a serene scene in a snow globe, or is it looking more like one of those touch sensitive plasma balls that goes crazy when you put your hand on it? Let's find out with Thomas and the psychic weather.
Well, that's a good analogy you made there about those plasma balls that go crazy when you touch them, because what the psychic weather seems to be at the moment is machines are breaking. I have lost an electric cooker and the motor on my windscreen wipers this week. I've seen traffic lights not working. I've seen lights failing in shops. I've seen the internet go down constantly. And I wonder, has this having to do with the solar flares we've had recently, or that's very strange big opening in the sun? Is that causing problems with the electronics here, or is it a kind of an astrological thing? I don't know. It's a very quick and simple psychic weather this week. Things are broken now. You need to be careful if you're on the road. If you've got a car that's dodgy, you don't want to be in a car where the windscreen wiper motor goes and it's raining. It's very dangerous, or the brakes or something gives you problems. I'd immediately get it fixed, and don't do anything risky. So that's the psychic weather this week. Anything mechanical has fallen to shite for some reason, and my suspect would be it's the same thing that was causing all the auroras and all the other stuff. There's something with that sun, that with that whole big black thing in the sun that's causing issues, maybe perhaps, or well, that's what I think, and that's the psychic weather this week.
Yep, can totally relate. I've had washing machine problems twice in one weekend, and my internet is just, I don't know what I'm paying for because it goes down all the time.
Yeah. And if the local airport had a few flights cancelled because of aircraft problems, and that never happens, you know. So not two or three. And trains are running late and everything. So yeah, it's like, machine malfunction, whatever causes that to happen.
Like you say, it could be a mix of the sun's black spots and a mix of Mercury in retrograde. And when you put it all together, you just get a great big plasma ball of everything breaking.
Yeah, or it could be a psychic state of humans that like our own nervous system causes these failures to happen. They're on the point of happening, and then we come near them and they break. Because we know, I mean, I've worked in electronic repair places, and I knew fellas that could fix a television just by switching it on. And we sort of looked inside and, found nothing wrong. And then he'd switch it on. Oh, look, it works. So some people have a gift that like the Uri Geller thing is true. They can stop watches or fix them. And it could be that we all have that ability in the wrong way at the moment.
Mm. Now it's time to dive into some more literature and share some of the books from our personal collections. And as I say every week, these books have both influenced and left a lasting impression on us, earning themselves a permanent spot on our bookshelves and coffee tables. And we hope that by sharing them with you, we can inspire you to discover more exciting books and add to your own collections. And my book this week is Infinite Worlds by Vincent Di. And I'm going to say that and try not to laugh because it does sound funny. But it's a collection of some of the finest science fiction art, taking you through the genre in retro illustrations. And it's got nearly 700 full colour reproductions of paintings and drawings and authoritative text. And it's about the history of science fiction and how it developed. And it's got a massive gallery of work from some of the artists in the field. And there's a hauntological aspect to it because it gives that retrospective look at the art that once painted the visions of yesterday's futures. And science fiction, as we know, always looks ahead to the future. And the art gives you an idea of how our future was once imagined. And Di has curated a focused collection here in this book because he said he prefers to delve deeply into one genre rather than various genres under the broader umbrella of fantasy illustration. And it's actually a book of prophetic art, and it takes you into the minds of people like H.G. Wells. And if in the past you enjoyed the sci-fi periodical magazine called Astounding Stories,
Yeah.
edited by John Wood Campbell Jr., then you'll love this book. I think that magazine eventually went on to be renamed Analog. And if you like the old sci-fi and the old sci-fi movies and the whole sci-fi genre in general, then you'll love this book. And I read it to appreciate the graphics and learn about the old periodicals from a time when sci-fi was quite a new genre. And it's a great coffee table and reference book, especially if you're a retro sci-fi fan. And there's not much more to say about it really, because its appeal is in its visuals. So I'll show you a few now. I'll just move that out the way. I mean, it's great. It's just full of this stuff. Uh,
Fabulous.
I don't know if you can see that very well.
Yeah, I can see it.
You see
How
it?
could you not? How could you not love this stuff?
And then you've got this. I love this picture here. There's a couple of guys in the background there playing chess, and then there's that great big ugly thing in the in the forefront, just sat there, looking lonely. Let me see if I
Is
can
it a
find.
is it a Taschen produced book?
I don't think it
It,
is.
it,
No.
it looks like a Taschen book.
The Wonderland Press.
No, I don't know. It just has that vibe feel about it.
Let me just see if I can find a few of. There we go. There we go. That's what I wanted to.
Astounding stories. Yeah.
Yeah, it's full. It's got all the front covers and some of the stories from inside and the artwork from inside. Yeah, from the 40s, the 50s, 60s. Revenge of the Creature. And it's just brilliant. It's just really, really good. And it's just a massive book, very heavy. Not one you could lie down and kick back and relax with. It's more you got to be sat at a table really to read it. And then we've got some as you go to the end of the book, gets a bit more modern, and we've got the airbrush effect. And one of the best things about this book, Thomas, is it's not an AI picture in sight. It's just pure, straight out the artist's mind.
Yep.
Fabulous book. With a foreword by a guy called Ray Bradbury.
Oh yeah, it's a famous science fiction writer. He even had his own TV series.
Yeah, like I say, I love the art in there. I'm not a geek on all the artists that it features, but the art and those periodicals about the strange stories, astounding stories, I'm aware of them, so it's nice to look back on that.
Yeah, Ray Bradbury wrote the Martian Chronicles, I think, which is a
Right.
sci-fi classic.
So yeah, that's Infinite Worlds by Vincent DiFarte with a foreword by Ray Bradbury.
My book this week is an old one that doesn't have a sleeve anymore. It's Anne Ross, and it's The Everyday Life of the Pagan Celts from 1970. Get that smell. And it's a book that might seem dated today. It's still, but not too bad. Despite the fact that it's generally accepted now that there was no such race as the Celts. Celts was just the word the Greeks used to describe foreigners as Celtoid. It just basically means outsiders. And then the whole thing of the first Celtic things, the Latin art culture was founded in the Hallstatt region of Austria. And then it still has the whole thing of the migration theory from, the Hallstatt culture now to these islands and stuff like that. And forget all that. It's still good read. And some of that still is true in terms of linguistic, like the Gaelic, the P and Q Celtic, like the Gaelic of Ireland and the Brittonic of Wales and, Brittonic England. But it's full of great illustrations and photographs. It's full of lots of archaeological references to things like artwork, jewelry, costumes. Great story. She's dived deep into the Irish annals, which was unusual for an outsider back then. Because a lot of stuff wasn't in English, and it's a fabulous book if you're interested in quote unquote Celtic stuff. It's a great, it's even though it's 1970s and its initial theories are the academic ones, it's very readable. It's very pleasantly written. It's nicely illustrated. It's a nice handy size to hold and that kind of thing. And, it goes into Ohm script. Come on, where am I? Ohm script, you see? And a lot of the stuff on, you know, uh, idols, Celtic idols and stuff like that, the head cult. But like I said, it's the broad Celtic thing, which really means that the the western part of Europe that wasn't in the Greco-Roman world, really, when you think about it. So, like the Gauls, the Lusitanians, the Irish, the Brittonics, the Galicians, the Bretons, that kind of thing, the Gauls. So, yeah, highly recommended. Wonderful old book. 1970 is not that old. Anne Ross, Everyday Life of the Pagan Celts, and definitely a good mainstream book that's not boring.
Is that easy to get hold of, Thomas? Because I had a look at the book you reviewed last week and it was around, but it was very, very expensive because it was so
Yeah,
rare.
I have a lot of antiquarian books that are probably a lot more expensive now. I'd imagine this would be like one of those A book ones that go for hundreds of euros, probably. But sometimes you get lucky and you find them. Like there's a market that I work in, and there's a couple there that like they bring books along from their uncle's house, and I've gotten some quite rare books for a fiver or a tenner. So you keep looking, you'll find them eventually. You always find them when you're not looking for them. That's what I find.
Yeah, I like these old rare books. I like to make a note of them, keep a list, and then keep a lookout for them. And you often
Yeah.
find that they turn up
I
for.
mean, maybe it has been reprinted ever since. I don't know. But a lot of stuff in it, I know personally. I've been to them, a lot of places, and they've got a lot of the artwork from the National Museum of Ireland illustrated in this. So, and lots of like beautiful, illustrations that led what they call, you see, there's basically what Celtic is really a linguistic and an artistic movement rather than a race of people. It's really an anachronism now to think in terms of Celtic as a race. Now, there's even contradictions there because they say from about 2,500 or 3,500 BC, the Hallstatt culture, they found this artwork in a cave, which was spirals and curves, which is the beginning of what we think is Celtic art, right? And that seems to have spread. They try to make that spread through Europe. However, there's contradictions in Clover Hill up here in Sligo. There's a cairn you can go into, and it has two sets of artwork. One is the Neolithic cups, marked circles, concentric circles, wavy lines, the classic stuff. And that's on an orthostat at the opening of the mound. But when you go into the back at the oldest part, you find a stone that has what they call the Latin Celtic art. I cover it in my book, The Druid Code, and I show it. So maybe that theory is that Hallstatt culture originating this stuff is wrong. I keep coming back to it came from Atlantis, landed on these islands, and then made its way to Europe. I don't buy this east-west migration thing so much. And while the Hallstatt culture, is a sound idea, and the idea of the Celts not being a race but being a linguistic or artistic culture is also valid. But then again, I look at Welsh, which is a Celtic language, and I look at Irish, which is a Celtic language, and a Welsh person and an Irish person can't understand each other. One may be talking Arabic, and the other may be talking Japanese. So, there's still a lot to be discovered, I think.
Sounds like an interesting book, and I shall put it on my list for looking out for. I like the thrill of the chase with books like that.
Yeah, there's also a very good TV series that I think might have been based on this by Frank Dunleavy. He was an Irish journalist who made a show for the BBC called The Celts back in the 1970s, and it's on YouTube for free, most of them. And I think he actually probably used this book as the guide thing, but it gives a good description into the Hallstatt culture and how that has been so influential within the development of European artwork.
Brilliant. Celts. I'll put a link to it. I'll find it and put a link in the description for people if they want to go there.
It's not the one from the 1990s that Enya did the music for, which is okay. It's the earlier 1970s one with Frank Dunleavy.
And here we are at the end of our penultimate episode before Yuletide and our Christmas special. And thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's show. And please don't forget that next week we will be going out on Monday, the 25th of December at 9 p.m. And on the 7th of January, Hocus Focus will be 1 year old. And for our anniversary edition, we'd like to ask you to get involved by taking a look back over the previous year's episodes and picking 2 subjects from them that you'd like us to take a deeper dive into. And you can put your suggestions in the comments, and the 2 most popular ones are the ones that we'll use. And I'm not going to try and influence you anyway, but I really did like the Fortiana of John Lennon. So I'll just put that out there. Anyway.
Yeah, but even though we'll cover the 2 big ones, we won't do a film or a book review that week, and we'll cover the smaller ones. So everyone will get a look in.
Okay, deal.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the meantime, between now and then, stay curious, stay weird, and remember that the truth is out there waiting to be uncovered.
Yeah, and don't forget we have a merchandise shop. And don't forget that the Christmas episode on December 25th at 9 p.m., not 8, will be a spectacular, including stuff you do not want to miss regarding a Mankini and a movie review. So be there or be square. The Christmas Day one will be, you'll really enjoy it. And it'll be like an old-fashioned Christmas Day special with guests and everything.
And we've even got a wardrobe malfunction, and that's all I'll say about that.
Involving a Mankini. Okay, Sarah, Hit me with that tarot card. Hit me. Hit me.
The tarot card for this week is the Queen of Pentacles, and she is the physical and material aspect of the mother figure, and she's handling matters related to money, property, and the practicalities that ensure our lives are secure. And the pentacles are represented by the earth element, and she sits on a throne looking at a pentacle as she oversees both our wealth and the earth itself. And she's surrounded by symbols of spring and fertility. There's a hare, lots of abundant vegetation, flowing water, and flowers. And the queen is very matter of fact. And the landscape that she rules over is a mixture of both cultivated and wild. And this suggests work that is still to be done, a work in progress. She's very happy within her garden or yard, and her focus is on long-term success, which shows that she's got patience and a willingness to see things through to the fruits of her labour. And there are carvings of pears on her throne, which could be symbolic of fertility and refer to the sacred nature of the pear, to Pomona, the Italian deity associated with fruit trees. There's a nymph carving on the throne's right side, which also could mean a connection to that goddess. And the goat's head on the throne is a symbol of Capricorn, and it's also shown in her crown with the horns. And the element combination of the Queen of Pentacles is the earth in water, and water nurtures the earth and aids crop growth, and this symbolizes her association with fertility and abundance. And in a tarot reading, the Queen of Pentacles often symbolizes a person, typically one with a strong, nurturing maternal instinct. And this individual is characterized by strength, wisdom, and affection. Whether it's an older woman or a younger female with an unusually mature demeanor, she tends to embody the qualities of a homemaker. Her love for tending to her home and garden is evident, and it reflects an appreciation for the finer aspects of life. She's skillful in managing finances, and she understands how to spend money wisely. She's a hands-on character who prefers giving practical assistance over just giving opinions from the sidelines. And the card can also be a reminder for the querent to pay attention to their body and finances. And the card could suggest that it's time to nurture both of these aspects. And in terms of influence, the Queen of Pentacles can mean positive developments related to marriage and financial stability for a couple. And overall, its presence in a reading suggests a time of stability, practicality, and well-rounded prosperity. And it is a very nice, nurturing, motherly card.
Look how beautiful it is in the Rider-Waite Radiant. Absolutely gorgeous card. Negative side, this is, there was always a joke when I was growing up that the American dream was for a man to get himself a wife and 2.5 kids and a house in the suburbs. Well, the Irish man's dream was to marry a widow with her own pub. And so she's that. This is your aunt who goes to Turkey on a holiday and comes back with her 20-year-old husband, Ali. She's prone to being taken advantage of in the negative by gigolos and stuff like that. That's the downside. Otherwise, wonderful card. A woman who's if you're an artist and you're looking for a benefactor or a sponsor, she's the kind of woman that would help you that way. The kind of thing, like take care of an artist who she believed in or something like that. So it's a beautiful, and the Rider-Waite Radiant version is absolutely gorgeous, the colors in it. It's very fruitful, and it's funny, it seems very Italian. Like I said, that it's got that very Hesta kind of Italian vibe to it. So yeah, we all love the Queen of Pentacles, especially Ali in Lesbos. Yeah. Good night, everybody, and be careful, Aunt Mary.
And don't forget, we will see you Christmas Day at 9 p.m. And we wish you a wonderful winter solstice and Io Saturnalia. Have a great time during the festive season.
Sean and Nola, good and Yule, and we'll see you at Christmas time. And keep yourself warm and be careful on the roads.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Ginger fairies.